My name is Emma, and I never thought a simple smile would change my entire perspective on life. It was a cold Tuesday morning in December when I first walked through the doors of Sunshine Manor, a senior living facility in suburban Chicago. The snowflakes were gently falling outside, covering the parking lot in a pristine white blanket that crunched under my worn-out sneakers. I had just turned 23, fresh out of college with a degree in social work that felt more like expensive paper than a ticket to my dreams. My student loans were piling up like the snow outside, and this job at the nursing home was supposed to be temporary, just something to pay the bills while I searched for something better. The facility manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, showed me around on my first day. The hallways smelled of disinfectant mixed with something that reminded me of my grandmother's house, a combination of lavender and old books. Most of our residents are lovely, Mrs. Rodriguez explained, as we walked past rooms where elderly people sat by their windows, some reading, others just watching the world go by. But I have to warn you about Mrs. Patterson in room 237. She's difficult. The staff calls her the Ice Queen. She never speaks to anyone, never participates in activities, and she's made 3 previous caregivers quit. I nodded, trying to appear confident despite the knot forming in my stomach. I needed this job desperately. My rent was due in 2 weeks, and my bank account was running dangerously low. Don't take it personally if she's rude to you, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. She's been here for 2 years, and in all that time, I've never seen her smile. Not once. Her family rarely visits, maybe twice since she's been here. It's sad, really. As we approached room 237, I could feel my palms getting sweaty. Through the partially open door, I caught a glimpse of a small, frail woman sitting in a wheelchair by the window. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a navy blue cardigan that looked expensive. Everything about her posture screamed, "Stay away." "Mrs. Patterson," Mrs. Rodriguez called softly as we entered. "This is Emma, your new caregiver." The elderly woman turned slowly, and I was struck by her piercing blue eyes. They were sharp, alert, but filled with something I couldn't quite identify. Sadness? Anger? Loneliness? She looked me up and down with the kind of scrutiny that made me want to check if my uniform was wrinkled. "Another one," she said in a crisp voice that carried the hint of an East Coast accent. "How long before this one runs away crying?" I felt my cheeks burn, but something inside me refused to back down. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the way her voice cracked just slightly on the word crying, revealing a vulnerability she was trying to hide. "I'm not planning on running anywhere, Mrs. Patterson," I said, offering her what I hoped was a warm smile. "I'm Emma, and I'm here to help make your days a little brighter." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to the window without another word. Mrs. Rodriguez gave me an apologetic look and whispered, "Like I said, don't take it personally." But as we left the room, I found myself thinking about those blue eyes and the way Mrs. Patterson had said, "Another one." Not with malice, but with the weariness of someone who had been disappointed too many times. Over the next few days, I established a routine with Mrs. Patterson. Every morning at 9, I would bring her breakfast and attempt conversation. Every morning, she would eat in silence while staring out the window at the courtyard where other residents sometimes walked with their families. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I would say, opening her curtains to let in the winter sunlight. Silence. "The weatherman says it might snow again tonight. I love how peaceful everything looks covered in snow." More silence. "I brought you some extra jam for your toast. Strawberry. It's my favorite." She would glance at me briefly, then return to her window watching. By Friday of my first week, I was beginning to understand why my predecessors had given up. Mrs. Patterson wasn't just unfriendly. She was completely unreachable. But something about her reminded me of my own grandmother, who had become withdrawn after my grandfather died. I remembered how lonely Grandma Rose had been, even surrounded by family. That afternoon, while helping Mrs. Patterson with her lunch, I noticed a small framed photograph on her nightstand that I hadn't seen before. It showed a much younger version of her standing next to a handsome man in a military uniform. They were both smiling, and her eyes sparkled with joy. "He was very handsome," I said softly, nodding toward the photo. For the first time since I'd started working there, Mrs. Patterson looked directly at me. Her expression softened for just a moment before the walls went back up. "That's none of your business," she said. but her voice lacked its usual sharpness. "You're right," I said, continuing to arrange her meal. "But you both look so happy in that picture. It must be a wonderful memory." She was quiet for a long time, picking at her sandwich. Then so quietly I almost missed it. She whispered, 62 years we were married." My heart clenched. "That's incredible. You must have had an amazing love story." She looked at me again, and this time I saw tears threatening to spill from those sharp blue eyes. "What would you know about love stories? You're just a child." The words stung, but I could hear the pain behind them. "You're right. I don't know much about 62-year love stories, but I'd love to learn, if you ever want to share." She turned back to the window, but I noticed she kept glancing at the photograph throughout the rest of the meal. That weekend, I found myself thinking about Mrs. Patterson constantly. I researched online about elderly depression and isolation, learning about how losing a spouse after such a long marriage could be devastating. I also looked up activities that might help engage withdrawn seniors. On Monday morning, instead of just bringing breakfast, I brought something else, a small potted plant with bright yellow flowers. "I thought your room could use some color," I said, placing it on the windowsill next to her chair. Mrs. Patterson stared at the plant, then at me. "I don't want your pity gifts." "It's not pity," I said, adjusting the pot so it caught the morning light. "It's marigolds. My grandmother always said they were the happiest flowers because they bloom even when everything else is dying." Something flickered across her face. "Your grandmother sounds like she was wise." She was. She also said that everyone deserves to have something beautiful to look at, especially on the hard days. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long time, studying the bright yellow petals. Finally, she said, Marigolds were Harold's favorite flower. He planted them in our garden every spring for 40 years. It was the first personal thing she had shared with me, and I felt like I had just been given a precious gift." "Harold was your husband?" I asked gently. She nodded, touching the frame of the photograph with one trembling finger. "Lieutenant Harold Patterson. He survived Korea, Vietnam, and 40 years of my cooking, but couldn't survive pancreatic cancer." The pain in her voice was raw, and I felt tears prick my own eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patterson. It sounds like he was an amazing man." "He was," she whispered. "And now I'm just an old lady who nobody wants to visit." The next few weeks brought subtle but meaningful changes. Mrs. Patterson still maintained her tough exterior, but she began sharing small memories about Harold. She told me about their first dance at a USO event in 1958, how he proposed during a snowstorm, and how they had traveled to all 50 states in their retirement. "We had planned to see Europe," she said one afternoon, while I helped her with her physical therapy exercises. "Harold always wanted to visit Normandy, where his father had served in World War II. But then he got sick, and—" her voice trailed off. "Maybe you could still go," I suggested. "I've heard about programs that help seniors travel." She gave me a look that could have withered the marigolds. "I'm 84 years old, in a wheelchair, and have no one to travel with." "Don't be ridiculous." But I could see her considering it, and I filed the information away for later. The real breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon in January. I was running late due to a traffic accident on I-94, and when I rushed into Mrs. Patterson's room, I found her crying silently while holding the photograph of her and Harold. "Mrs. Patterson, what's wrong?" I asked, immediately sitting beside her. "Today would have been our 65th wedding anniversary," she sobbed. 65 years, and I'm spending it alone in this place, forgotten by everyone." My heart broke seeing this proud, strong woman so devastated. Without thinking, I reached out and took her hand. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. "You're not forgotten," I said softly. "I think about you all the time. I wonder what stories you might share, what wisdom you might have. You're not just an old lady to me, Mrs. Patterson. You're Elizabeth, a woman who loved deeply, lived fully, and still has so much to offer the world." She looked up at me with surprise. "How did you know my first name?" I smiled. "I pay attention. And Elizabeth is a beautiful name for a remarkable woman." For the first time since I'd known her, Elizabeth Patterson smiled. It was small, tentative, but it transformed her entire face. Suddenly, I could see the young woman from the photograph, vibrant, loved, and full of life. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered. "It's been so long since someone saw me as more than just this." She gestured to her wheelchair, to the sterile room around us. From that day forward, everything changed. Elizabeth began joining group activities, started eating meals in the common dining room, and even began helping other newer residents adjust to life at Sunshine Manor. The staff couldn't believe the transformation, but the biggest surprise came on a Friday afternoon in February. I was finishing my shift when Mrs. Rodriguez approached me with an unusual expression on her face. "Emma, there's a situation with Mrs. Patterson. Her family is here, all of them. Her son flew in from California, her daughter drove up from Indianapolis, and her grandchildren are here too. They're asking specifically for you." My stomach dropped. Had Elizabeth complained about me? Had I overstepped some boundary? "What kind of situation?" I asked nervously. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled mysteriously. "Go to room 237, you'll see." As I walked down the familiar hallway, my heart was pounding. Outside Elizabeth's room, I could hear multiple voices, some I didn't recognize. I knocked softly and heard Elizabeth call out, "Come in!" I opened the door and was greeted by an incredible sight. Elizabeth's room was filled with people, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s who had her same sharp blue eyes, a woman around the same age with Elizabeth's elegant posture, and 4 younger adults who were clearly grandchildren. They were all standing around Elizabeth's wheelchair, and the room was alive with laughter and conversation. But what happened next took my breath away. The moment I stepped into the room, Elizabeth's face lit up with the biggest smile I'd ever seen from her, and she said, "Everyone, this is Emma, the angel who saved my life." The entire family turned to look at me, and then something extraordinary happened. One by one, they all stood up. The son stepped forward first. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm David, Elizabeth's son. I can't thank you enough for what you've done for my mother." I don't understand," I stammered, looking around the room at all these faces looking at me with gratitude and warmth. Elizabeth's daughter, who I learned was named Patricia, came forward next. "Mom called us last week and told us everything. How you brought her marigolds, how you listened to her stories about Dad, how you made her feel human again. We're so ashamed," David continued, his eyes filling with tears. "After Dad died, we thought the best thing for Mom was to keep her comfortable and safe. We didn't realize we were abandoning her." Elizabeth reached out and took my hand. Emma helped me remember that I'm not just an old lady waiting to die. She helped me remember Elizabeth, the woman who danced with Harold, who raised children, who traveled the country. She gave me back my life. One of the grandchildren, a young woman about my age, stepped forward. "Grandma told us about the Europe trip she and Grandpa never got to take. We've been planning a surprise." Patricia pulled out a folder filled with papers. "We've arranged for a private nurse to accompany her on a 2-week trip to France and England this spring. She'll see Normandy for Harold, visit the places they dreamed about together." I felt tears streaming down my face as Elizabeth squeezed my hand tighter. "And Emma," she said, "I want you to come with me. Not as my caregiver, but as my friend. The family has agreed to pay for everything. Your time off, your flight, everything." The room erupted in agreement from all the family members, and I found myself overwhelmed by their generosity and Elizabeth's transformation. This was the same woman who 3 months ago wouldn't even acknowledge my presence. I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say yes," Elizabeth said firmly. "I need someone there who understands that this trip isn't just about seeing new places. It's about honoring Harold's memory and proving that it's never too late to live." David nodded enthusiastically. "Emma, you gave us our mother back. This is the least we can do." As I looked around the room at this family that had been reunited, at Elizabeth, whose eyes now sparkled with life and purpose, I realized that I had been completely wrong about what constituted a real job. I had thought working at the nursing home was just a temporary stop on my way to something better. But standing there, surrounded by the love and gratitude of Elizabeth's family, I understood that I had already found something better. I had found my calling, my purpose, my way to make a real difference in the world. "Yes," I said, smiling through my tears. "Yes, I would be honored to go to Europe with you, Elizabeth." Elizabeth beamed, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked exactly like the young woman in that photograph, full of joy, surrounded by love, and ready for the next adventure. That night, as I drove home through the snowy Chicago streets, I thought about how a simple smile and a willingness to see beyond the surface had changed both our lives. Elizabeth wasn't just an old lady, And I wasn't just a temporary caregiver. We were two people who had found exactly what we needed in each other: friendship, purpose, and proof that it's never too late to begin again. The marigolds on her windowsill were still blooming, bright and defiant against the winter cold, just like Elizabeth herself.